Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Dreadnought and the Fang. Before we head into the content, if you like this sort of content, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'd be eternally grateful. Anyways, on to the story. Dreadnought and the Fang, written by Wyron99.
This is Celtic Thor, broadcasting on all frequencies. Our defense fleet was destroyed in an ambush by unknown force. To any ship by an unknown force. To any ship in range, we request an immediate assistance with the evacuation efforts. Silence. Again. Daz was getting desperate. Down there, the lives of millions of colonists were at stake. It was his duty to protect them to his last scale. But his destroyer could only do so much. The Fang had avoided the massacre of the main fleet by sheer luck. Breakdown of her engine simply meant that she didn't sail out in time. But now, it was the only armed thing between the attacker and the civilian ships taking on as many refugees as they could. Tissus looked at the screen, seeing the busy activity on the surface. Those captains knew it too. When the attackers return, nothing will stop them from pillaging and killing all of the colonists. The best Tissus could hope for was to delay them a little. "Commander, repeat the broadcast again," he ordered in his hissy reptilian language. "Lieutenant, bring us to the closer orbit. We need to keep ourselves as close to the civilian ships as possible." "Aye, Captain," replied the officers at once. "Captain, FTL detected," alarmed him one of the ensigns. "Red alert, prepare for combat," shouted Tissus the order. He tensed in the chair. "They're here sooner than I expected," he thought to himself. The Fang engines bursted to life as the ship moved to position. Main guns were armed and ready. Torpedoes and missile silos opened the initial salvo. "Maybe we can get 2 or 3 before we go down. Perhaps we can self-destruct our FTL core." If he were to go down, he wanted to take as many of them as possible. The rift suddenly got bigger and brighter. A grey hull started to sail through, a massive colossus of a ship. Tissus observed it in awe. The ship was angular, with heavy dorsal armor, as if adorned by hexagonal plate armor. He counted no less than 6 triple-barreled main battery guns, 2 on the ventral side, 4 on dorsal, both sets in super-firing positions. Each turret was twice as large as his own ship. He spotted rows of missile silos on each side. Their hatches were quickly opening and revealing the warheads. "Detecting fission material in those warheads," an officer confirmed his suspicions. Beside the nuclear missiles and main battery guns, there were dozens of secondary dual-purpose twin-barreled batteries scattered all over the ship, giving it a 360 degrees firing arc. And to top it all off, AAA and CIWS weaponry, including interceptor missiles, were scanning the area at full alert. On armored prow proudly emblazoned were the words HMS Dreadnought. "Humans," Tissus thought, as if the kinetic nature of the ship's weaponry did not reveal it enough. Tissus' species and humans had a difficult history, to say the least. Being the closest interstellar neighbors, there ought to be tension with the human coalition and all of their tiny nations. He wouldn't describe them as enemies, more like rivals. Both species competing for the same area of space, for the same resources. They never entered a direct conflict, but that didn't mean that there were no strong words or even acts of sabotage from both sides. Like a mysterious computer virus of unknown origin that crippled most of their non-critical software a few years ago. Or that one time a human ship ran out of fuel and had to wait for 2 years before getting permission to dock. The crew was almost starved to death at that point. There was a bitter rivalry between them. If you were to ask humans who would be most likely to invade them, it would be Tissus' people, and vice versa. "They are here to enjoy the show," wondered Tissus darkly. That would be so typical, sending their strongest ship and then just let it watch as the attackers destroy all of their forces. Perhaps they were hoping to claim the planet for themselves after. "Captain, we're being hailed." Tissus was taken out of his train of thought and ordered for the transmission to be open on the main screen.
Captain Sherwood of the British warship HMS Dreadnought. We have arrived as soon as we could. How can we be of assistance? Said the human captain within the stereotypical British accent.
This is Captain Tassas of the Fang. Our colony faces imminent attack by an unknown enemy force. We request your assistance in evacuation of civilians to safety while holding back the enemy assault. Our sensors are already picking up FTL rifts at the polar orbit. Tassas was expecting some bargaining. He expected to be ridiculed or laughed at by the human captain. But instead, the hairless ape did none of that. Understood. Dreadnought will move into position to intercept, sending fighters to cover the evacuation fleet. If I may, I would ask that you stay back with the civilian ships and engage any enemy that get past us. That was a sound idea. Roger. Are your reinforcements on the way?
Unfortunately, no. The closest fleet is 3 solar days away. We are the only ones in range.
Understood.
The captain nodded. The man noticed the baffled expression on the bridge of Tassas' ship and wanted to act on it. Sir, we may not be allies, but both of our nations value the lives of our civilians above all. We will save as many as we can, together. Dreadnought out.
Dreadnought lit its thrusters. For a ship of its size, it was impressively nimble. Hangar doors at the bottom of the ship opened, sending out hundreds of unmanned and manned fighters in swarms to cover the fleeing ships. Dreadnought itself turned broadside towards all the FTL rifts, aiming its guns and getting ready for the onslaught. It was just as the first refugee ships started to rise up from the surface that the enemy ships revealed themselves. More organic and black than anything he knew, they resembled some kinds of insects. Sensors could not discern any weapon mounts, yet they immediately started blasting with their energy weapons. The communications officer was intercepting the short-range radio chatter on board the Dreadnought. Its crew was still using radios to communicate between different parts of the ship, and played it over the comm. Target the latest enemy vessel. Secondary guns load the cluster munitions. Tactical nukes and missiles on standby. The Dreadnought opened fire. Tassas observed it in the bridge. There were cameras giving them live feed of the actions. Dozens of attacking vessels started barreling down towards Dreadnought, only to be met by a bullet hell. Main guns, open fire. Main batteries shocked the ship so loudly it could be heard through the radio, each salvo blindingly bright before impacting enemy vessels, pulverizing them in a single shot. Enemy hit. Hostile fighters, course 029, bearing 150, range 12 miles.
Enemy fighter craft peeled off from their carriers, trying to get to the transport. Squadron Delta intercepting. Human fighter jets engaged him in a frantic dogfight. The maneuvers the human fighters performed were staggering. He would expect something like that from a machine, not a biological life form. Several carriers appeared from the rifts, launching bombers and sending a barrage of rockets at Dreadnought. Activate the flak fields. He heard an order being shouted. Tassas never before saw a flak field, but when he did, he was quite impressed. Whole of the Dreadnought's starboard side erupted in fire, small clouds of explosion denying any chances of incoming ammunition to hit. Volley of missiles entered the field. They were ripped apart by the flak and CIWS. Bombers saw that and attempted to flank the ship from underneath. This was met with partial success, as almost all of its AAA guns were focused on the missiles. They launched a payload straight into the engine caster. However, Dreadnought was so heavily armored that it seemed to do no damage. As a reaction, Dreadnought engaged its thrusters and launched itself forward, all guns blazing. Lines of rounds painted the empty void with their orange glow, leaving behind small clouds of sparkling particles from their propellant charges. Dreadnought maneuvered carefully, making sure the most armored part of the ship always faced the enemy. Tassas immediately recognized from their course that they were getting themselves into position to launch their nukes as close as possible, to make their interception possible.
Activate flash protocols. All hands brace for nuclear strikes on the vessels,
shouted Tassas on the bridge. All windows automatically dimmed to pitch black. Only monitor screens remained. Dreadnought shook under the incoming fire, the ion beams heating and melting parts of its thickly armored skin. But then she launched its payload. Nukes away, 10 seconds to impact, single line over the radio. For a moment, he could glimpse panic in the enemy formation as they realized what was about to strike them. But it was too late. Dozens of tactical warheads detonated on them, vaporizing many ships in their blast, or severely damaging them. Subspace shockwaves of their detonating FTL cores were enough to cause actual structural damage to the Fang. Blasted debris launched itself like giant shrapnel.
Evasive maneuvers, shoot the debris that goes towards the refugees.
Aye, sir. Fang weaved its way through the debris and opened fire with its plasma guns, managing to deviate or melt most of the debris away. There was a moment of respite as the enemy vessels pulled back and regrouped.
Commander, status report,
he ordered.
Dreadnought sustained damage, unknown severity. There are more rifts opening, detecting incoming crafts behind us, corvettes. They almost reached the convoy.
You gauge them at will. It was Fang's time to shine, the little ship that could. Green plasma beams pierced the black void of space, hitting the enemy vessels with the power of a battleship. With precise shooting, it made quick work of the enemy ship. However, they were hit in return by an ion beam. Ship shook and creaked as one of the main guns was torn away from the hull. Onboard electronics went haywire as the charged ion particles decimated sensitive hardware.
Main computers unresponsive, switching to manual backup. Hellbridge! Isolate the area now.
Commanded to SAS.
Eyes on Deck 7. Send the damage control teams to affected locations.
While Fang had its own problems, Dreadnought was still fighting. More and more ships appeared. Dreadnought visibly slowed down, one of its engines on fire. Pristine hull smeared with black blasts or crumbled by impacts. Battered but unbeaten, they continued fighting. The main guns unleashing metallic fury at faster pace than before. Ship lashed out with lead, ripping and tearing enemies apart. Even CIWS was being used as an oversized buzzsaw. Stream of tracer rounds so dense it looked like she was firing away with the beam weapons. Enemy hull stood no chance. A graveyard of ships and debris started to mount around Dreadnought. Aliens fired relentlessly with their ion weapons. Dreadnought was taking more and more damage. Like a true brawler, it returned the favoring kind. But it could not last forever.
Sir, incoming communications from Dreadnought.
On screen. A view on the bridge, the beast painted a bruised image. There were wires hanging out from the ceiling, small fires being put out, alongside some rock-like debris on the floor. "This is Dreadnought, requesting an update on the refugees," asked the captain.
Tassas ignored the streak of blood across his forehead and replied, "Only 3 ships left, sir, then we can cover your retreat."
The human captain grumbled. "I'm afraid we won't make it back home for tea and medals. They struck our FTL call. It's, irreparably damaged."
Quickly thinking on his feet, Tassas ordered, "We can send you our own spare parts, sir. I can have my engineers working on it immediately."
Captain shook his head. "Too risky for your crew. They wouldn't make it over to us. Besides, this is a new experimental core. I doubt there are any parts compatible between our ships."
Tassas silently nodded in acknowledgement.
"We'll fight on as long as we can. May I request to take aboard your fleet our fighters, crafts, and shuttles?"
"Yes, sir, but your capacity is limited. We may not have room for everyone," informed him Tassas.
"I am aware of the possibility. We will move Dreadnought to cover our small crafts and escape pods. I'll try to evacuate as many of my crew as possible." Dreadnought out. Screen went black. Outside cameras picked up the image of the outside.
"You heard the human. Prepare medbay for incoming wounded. Call out to the refugee fleet. Tell them to do final preparations for FTL, and take any human ships that lands on them aboard."
Commander nodded and started messaging the fleet. Tass observed the screen as the Dreadnought turned its massive bulk to expose as much of its hull as possible to cover the flying craft. Guns were blazing, repeatedly detonating the black alien vessels in spray of machine gore. Another ion beam, this time hitting one of the main guns, detonating its ammo, ripping parts of Dreadnought's superstructure in a massive explosion. Tassas watched in shock. This would be a killing blow on a normal human ship, but not for Dreadnought. Listing, black smoke and embers jetting out from its wound, she just clenched its teeth and roared with its guns in anger. She fought on, even as she started to fall apart. She valiantly defended her escaping crew, but many shuttles still got hit. Bodies could be seen floating in the vacuum. Tassas decided to act. "Helm, bring Fang as close as possible to Dreadnought as possible."
"But sir, that would put us in direct line of fire of the enemy capital ships." "I am aware. That's the order."
"Aye, sir. Flank speed ahead." The Fang raced towards the wounded battleship. On its way, fighting with smaller ships and fighters, streams of plasma struck an enemy destroyer, cutting it in half. before its FTL core detonated. Shockwave propelled Fang even faster, shook its hull, lights flickered and turned off. They just lost auxiliary power. "Restore the power immediately," ordered Sass. "Sir, one of the capital ships has a lock on us." Before Sass could react, missiles were already on their way. He stared at the radar, observing the incoming doom. But just in the nick of time, Dreadnought came barreling down with its CIWS and blasted all the missiles to hell. One exploded so closely that they could hear its broken parts impacting the hull. "Incoming transmissions, sound only." "Play it." "Captain," shouted the human captain. "Captain, what the hell are you doing, you bloody Mongron? You were supposed to stay at the evacuation fleet."
"The evacuation fleet is safe distance and almost ready to depart. I'm here to save as many of you as possible."
It was a laugh what he was hearing, but it was not the mean-spirited kind he was used to. This sounded like genuine laugh from a comrade. "Your help is appreciated. Stand by for docking hooks."
"Docking hooks?"
wondered Sass aloud before finding out. Ding, bing. Metallic sound echoed through the ship.
"Sir, we've been hit by something,"
informed him clueless ensign. "We are being firmly held by the Dreadnought." That was the moment Sass realized. "Open all outside hatches, all of them!" And it was just in time, as humans in emergency EVA suits started to flood the airlocks, jumping from one ship to the other. Interesting, the wounded go first, followed by the youngest, thought Sass, as his crew helped the humans get inside. Meanwhile, Sass could feel the fury of the Dreadnought being so close to it. The hull vibrated with weapon fire. Each hit taken by it shook the destroyer immensely. Pieces of debris struck something on the communication array, as all outside communications went dark. "Restore the comms," ordered Sass, sending repair teams. "Sir, one of the rescued humans demands to see you," informed him the chief medical officers over the intercom. Sass hesitated, but then allowed it. "Bring him in." Soon after, a woman in what he imagines used to be a bright white uniform, adorned by blue and gold, entered. Now, it was splattered with blood and soot. "I am Sass, captain of the Fang, and you are?" "First Officer Miranda Carter. I have an urgent matter to tell you, sir." Sass nodded in sign to continue. "Sir, we identified the enemy flagship. Captain intends to ram it and detonate the FTL core. You have exactly 2 minutes to get out." Sass's eyes opened wide, but his training did not make him hesitate for a second. "Thrusters to maximum. Close the hatches. Get us out of here."
"Sir, what about the humans?"
Sass glanced at the human officer on his bridge. She had a grim expression, but did a small nod of acknowledgement. She understood the situation, as did he.
"There is nothing we could do for them, otherwise we would lose all the ones we'd saved,"
he said plainly. It was such a weird feeling. Just yesterday, he would not bash an eye over a lost human, heck, even 1,000 of them. But now, it felt like leaving behind his own men. His officers followed orders to the letter, after all. It was not physically difficult to get free of the Dreadnought's clamps, but it felt like an agonizing eternity. With the message of Dreadnought's intention, civilian ships started to escape into FTL. They took as many human ships as possible, but many were left behind. It was still too early to count the survivors, however. His own ship was full to the brim, life support barely keeping up. As the last of the refugee ships jumped away, the Fang remained alone with the Dreadnought. Ion beams started to glance at the hull, as the enemy had nothing better to shoot at now. Comms were damaged, but they still received a simple text message from the Dreadnought. "Remember our sacrifice. Carry on without us. Dreadnought out." The massive ship, now reduced to a smoldering wreck, still blazing away with a single remaining gun, picked up speed and flew through the battlefield. Some smaller enemy ships were unfortunate enough to get caught by the ramming bow. They exploded in a magnificent firework display before the Dreadnought reached its destination. It rammed one of the enemy capital ships with enormous force, cutting nearly halfway through it. Then, exactly 10 seconds later, a blinding flash of the detonated FTL core created a singularity, pulling everything around with the force of an artificial black hole. "Jump now!" shouted Sass before the shockwave could catch them. At the last second, battered Fang opened the FTL rift and jumped away. And that was the end of the Dreadnought. Later, it was discovered that out of the 5,000 crewmen, 3,231 survived, mostly thanks to Sass's brave maneuver. Sass became the first alien to be decorated by a human government, earning something called the George Cross. Captain Sherwood was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross and had a battleship named in his honor. Their brave defense of Celtic 4 led to the forging of the Human-Atari Alliance, which later managed to liberate the planet and push the invaders out. Tassas himself became the first admiral of the Alliance and served aboard the HMS Dreadnought II, before retiring 50 years later. To this day, he remains the most decorated Alliance officer and is considered a key figure in bringing permanent peace between the both species. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Caspar Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon WRE, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.